it does seem like everything points to you guys coming out with the upset. It's just very it's very like NCAA March Madness esque that you're kind of
Yeah.
like picking the underdog. And it's
Hello and welcome to the Friday, April 15th edition of the TV on Basketball podcast with your host, TV. Hope you're having a fantastic day and thank you for clicking on to watch or listen to today's episode. Before we start, I do have to plug my other platforms. Remember to follow at TV on Basketball on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok for updates on the podcast and for other great content. If you're on YouTube, remember to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you will not miss an episode. And for my podcast listeners, remember to subscribe, leave a review if you're on Apple, and for Spotify, Anchor, and Podbean listeners, to show your support in any way possible, that would be highly, highly appreciated. And yes, I am back for what? My third episode of the week. On Monday, we had the NBA Award Show with Juan from the Max and Juancast, which is a really fun episode. You should definitely check that out. And then on Wednesday, I made my all NBA, all defense, all rookie selections in a bonus episode on Wednesday. But we're not stopping here because the playoffs start tomorrow. As you guys are seeing this, we're recording this on a Thursday, but the playoffs are starting on Saturday. And of course, I have to make my playoff predictions, and I had to bring one of my guys back on the show. If we have Jalon from the Hoop Talk podcast, how's it going, my guy?
what's up, bro? I'm excited to get into this, man. Playoff content. We've been looking forward to this since earlier on the season. Last time we talked with you, the push to the playoffs was barely around the corner. Now we've gotten past the All-Star break. About to get hype.
That's definitely super hype, and I'm so excited. We're gonna go through the eight potential series, because we still don't know the results of the eight seed matchup, but we're gonna get to that as well. And we're gonna talk all playoffs in this episode. And yeah, it's gonna be super fun. If you want to check out Jalon and all the stuff that they're doing right now, I'm gonna have all their links down in the description below. He's been here around. He was, oh, of course, you've seen him on the TikToks for all the daily NBA pickups throughout the contest. And I had to take the dub there. I had to take the dub there at the end. I know. I mean, we're gonna have some sort of payoff. We're gonna have him on the show probably some point in the playoffs. Maybe, hopefully, with Ryan coming back on the show in the future, we'll have some sort of payoff. We'll have him do something kind of maybe embarrassing on the show or something like that. to have the W because I took the W. But yeah, we're gonna be going into the playoffs. Should be super fun. And yeah, let's get right into this because there is so much playoff stuff to talk about. And honestly, these playing games have been really good, apart from yesterday's games, but hopefully the Friday games come out pretty clutch too. Jalen, are you ready to get into this?
Yes, sir. Let's go.
Let's get into this. And actually, I mean, we talked about this before the show, and I have a feeling like, I didn't do my due diligence on talking about this team beforehand. And I think it's time for me to let's set out our grievances, Jalen. The Los Angeles Lakers didn't make the play-in at all. Russell Westbrook, Anthony Davis, LeBron James. You tell me that before the season they wouldn't even make the play-in? Not even the play-in? I would say that you're crazy, but it's a real reality. I mean, I don't know where to start with this. How do you feel about the Lakers, man? I mean, this disaster. That's like one word I could describe this.
Man, I think the best way to put it is, I mean, if you listen to me and Ryan talk about the Lakers throughout the season, and we try to keep it at a bare minimum because mainstream media, they cover the Lakers pretty
All
closely
the
anyway.
time.
So they got the game on lock. So we try not to worry about it too much. But whenever we talked about the Lakers, we would bring it up to our guests like, yo, if you look at this roster, if you look at the way things are constructed, the way Russell Westbrook likes to play, the way LeBron James needs to play and be successful, the health questions around AD at any given year, the fact that this team regressed from being a defensive based squad to now just being an all offensive based team, it all pointed to what me and Ryan believed, them being no better than a play-in team. That's what we said all year. We had guests think we were crazy. They were like, there's no way in the world. And when we tried to defend it, it seemed like we were kind of pulling ideas from thin air. But the truth is, the proof is in the pudding now. And it's even worse than what we thought because they didn't even make the play-in tournament. We
Yeah.
had them as we had them penciled in as at bare minimum a play-in team, maybe even at their peak being somewhere around that 7-8 as a team that would have to defend themselves at least in that first round of the play-in
Yeah.
tournament. They didn't even crack the rotation. Didn't even crack the rotation. We're talking TV. We are talking about the New Orleans Pelicans who have not seen Zion Williamson dribble a basketball in live action on the second day of the tournament. That's
Yeah.
what we're talking about right now. But the LA Lakers are not even in the mix. I think that is just an insane feat, both in terms of just like the all-time lows of like what this team could have looked like. And I think for all the Lakers stands, this is one of the you're in the camp of you're either screaming the loudest in defense of your team or you are as quiet as can be because you have nothing left to say. And the Lakers are just putting people in that position, and that's tough to be in.
Yeah, no, 100%. And okay, I'm gonna this is gonna be my time because I've been saying all year that this roster is probably one of the worst constructed rosters in the league. But look, I have to give him a benefit of the doubt. I could not doubt LeBron James for the life of me. I said that before the season, and I thought this is a hot take, that the Lakers are going to be a 5th seed. And I was like, am I not giving them like too much credit? I mean, it's still Anthony Davis, still LeBron James. Am I giving them like too little credit? And people were like having them in like the top 3 seeds. They're like, look, if LeBron goes out, if AD goes out, Westbrook's going to carry. What are you talking about?
Right.
This whole season has been probably the most disastrous season I've seen for a team. And like, I can't remember the last team that had this much of a disaster. And I thought the Lakers team with Dwight, Steve Nash, Kobe, Powell, I thought that was a disaster season because people were like, this is going to be a guaranteed finals team. This is worse, much worse. This is like, tell me, like, I'm going to tell you some guys on the roster. Tell me if who thinks this is a playoff team besides, Westbrook, AD, LeBron. The guys around them, Dwight Howard, DJ Augustine, Avery Bradley, Wayne Ellington, Taylor Horton Tucker, Malik Monk. Like, you go up and down the roster and be like, what is this around them? What is this? And then I was just, jaded by the fact they have LeBron. That's enough. Nope. This guy will score 38 and 7 every single goddamn night and still lose by 20. You know why? The rest of the rotation. They decided to fire Frank Vogel the other day. Sure, they need to make a change. Why aren't we looking at Rob Pelinka? Why aren't we looking at Rob Pelinka? Like, who thought this is a good idea? I remember when the Russell Westbrook trade went down a few hours beforehand. The Lakers about to trade some pieces, get Buddy Hield. I'm like, you know what? That should be better. That's gonna at least help out for a perfect LeBron, like a LeBron team player. They trade for Westbrook, and I'm like, huh? Why? what does this do for LeBron? Having Westbrook as there's no off-ball presence with Westbrook. There's nothing there. And I don't want to put all the blame on him. He was put in probably the worst scenario you could put for him, beside 2 ball-dominant guys in AD and LeBron. But yeah, this season has been a disaster. I don't even want to put most of the blame on Russell Westbrook. I would honestly put it Rob Pelinka. And secondly, I've been saying this all season long. Anthony Davis, you cannot build around this guy. You just can't. He has not been on the floor. He missed another good chunk of games and then came back for the final 3 games of the season. Nothing. You're gonna keep. This is why he just signed a contract a few years ago. He wanted to sign the max and not wait till he turned 30 and get the super max. That's not what was gonna happen because he can't trust his own body. The Lakers should be trusting him to go forward. It's just a whole disaster of the season, and honestly, I don't know how they're gonna get out of this. They're gonna be kind of stuck in the same place, and relying on a 37, gonna turn 38 this year, LeBron James is not what you want to see for a marquee franchise in the Los Angeles Lakers. You just don't want to see that. And again, I'm gonna keep reiterating this is a disaster. This is probably one of the worst performances from a big 3-led team I've ever seen. It's just horrible.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of further upon that, you talked about the Russell Westbrook. We talked about this on the podcast the other day with All Hustle No Luck. And what they brought up was Chris in particular brought up the idea of what does Russell Westbrook do for this roster for LeBron James? I mean, in terms of playing together, because the excuses or the logic behind it when it was first signed off, people were saying he can kill when LeBron James is off the floor. That was what you had mentioned earlier too. This idea that he would be able to take up those minutes so that you could rest LeBron throughout the season, and that would help. We saw Russell Westbrook lose twice to the Oklahoma City Thunder, running it solo dolo, right?
Yeah.
So if you can't beat Oklahoma City holding the fort down, What are you supposed to do against some of the other low end teams, the Orlando Magic, the Houston Rockets of the world that the Lakers play multiple times throughout the season? That didn't even suffice. And beyond that, we all didn't believe in the on court stuff. So in that being the case, everything that you thought was best case scenario for this team with Russell Westbrook on it ended up going left. Now, again, I agree with you. I can't put all the blame on Russ either because I feel as though from a fit standpoint, you couldn't have put him in a worse scenario for himself. I think we even identified last season with that late season push with the Wizards that sometimes you just got to let that man cook, and he cannot do that within the roster the way that Lakers were framed this year.
Yeah.
The Palinka thing is a great point too because of the fact that the law GM thing comes up all the time. And don't get me wrong, it's a funny meme to
Yeah.
put around, but Rob Palinka, he is a guy who is invisible when he makes good moves, like when he was able to make a couple veteran acquisitions in the
Yeah.
in that 2020 year where they had made the run in the bubble. But when he makes moves like these, everybody's pointing the finger at him. I feel as though there needs to be a level of consistency in terms
Yeah.
of it. I feel as though if you're going to give the man all of this strife for this season and the way he did things, you also have to give him equal praise in the way he constructed the team for the 2020 year. But during each season, they try to focus on what La GM did and focus more on that. I think that Rob Pelinka is somebody who I don't think he has to go, but I think that he needs to be more of the GM for this team. I think
Yeah.
he needs to be more in an assertive role as a guy who is making calls based off what he thinks makes sense, not based on what LeBron James is whispering in his ear, as most people kind of allude to.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that has to be the same for player acquisitions and also in the coaching. That also has
Word.
to be in the coaching. They got rid of Frank Vogel. There's a lot of random candidates out there, and I'm gonna nip this in the bucket right away. They are not getting Nick Nurse.
Nope.
They are
Nope.
not getting Nick Nurse. I'm gonna tell you right here, right now. He is not. The Lakers' job right now is a downgrade on the Raptors. It is
Facts.
a downgrade, and he has the perfect scenario for them. Masai Ujiri has him like with him, trying to build this roster, making it what he wants. He has full trust in the organization. Why would he go there when they can't even tell Frank Vogel that he's been fired before the media does? Like, it's ridiculous. That's why Quinn Snyder put his name out the race.
Yep.
The Lakers right now are a dumpster fire. I don't know if they're going to get rid of how they're going to be able to fix this. But the good thing is, it's NBA playoff basketball. We don't have to talk about them, which is perfect. Unless something crazy happens, like Westbrook says something like completely out of pocket or something like that, we're not going to discuss it. So that's good. And I think this is the last we can say it. RIP to Lakers for the season. Are you ready to move on? Because I have been tired of hearing the Laker talk all season.
Man, I am with you, bro. The West Coast bias is so volatile, but this playoffs right here, I think the East got it on lock, bro. I think in terms of primetime TV and headlines, the Eastern Conference, the bloodbath that is, got the game on lock right now. So I am excited.
Yeah, and you've transitioned this perfectly because we will be starting off in the East for these NBA East for the NBA playoff predictions. And we're going to start off with the 1-8 matchup. And yes, we don't know it yet, but this is going to be a great chance for us to discuss who they're going to win the matchup and their chances against the Heat. So let's talk first. Hawks versus Cavs. The Hawks were able to destroy the Hornets yesterday in order to get their play-in win, while the Cavs fell just short to the Brooklyn Nets in their matchup on Tuesday. Now they're facing up on Friday. I mean, who do you think really has the advantage matchup, and do you think either of them has like a better chance against the Heat than the other?
So I gotta go with Atlanta, and I think that if Jared Allen were playing, that would actually sway my choice a little bit more. But the fact that he's not going to be available, at least as of what we know right now, is going to be one of those things that I think truly influences this game because Cleveland really just hasn't played their best basketball since he's missed time as of late, and that's
Yeah.
really kind of hurt them. And when you look at these two rosters blow for blow, especially like from the offensive end, I think Trey Young and Darius Garland match up relatively well when you talk about going basket for basket. But once you start going down the roster of these two teams, it easily favors a team in Atlanta from an offensive standpoint. And granted, Cleveland has played definitely above their belt, I would say, in terms of how they performed on the defensive end. They've been one of the better defensive teams this year. But I think that especially without Jared Allen anchoring things, that defense has even looked a little bit suspect. And I think against a team like Atlanta, especially coming off the kind of win they just got over Charlotte, really puts them in a good position.
No, yeah, 100%. And the thing is, yeah, like you said, we just don't know if Jared Allen is playing or not. They are very hopeful that he will be for tomorrow. And if
Mhm.
that's the case, then honestly, I think that's going to be the difference maker for me as well. If Jared Allen is playing, I will take the Cavs to win. I will, because honestly, it's going to be just so tough for the Hawks on the perimeter to just like, at least for the Cavs guys to just guard the Hawks on the perimeter, then just funnel them into the paint. And who are they going to go up against? Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. That has been their whole thing this entire year, and it's worked. That's why they're one of the best defenses in the league. But without Jared Allen, you're trusting Evan Mobley to anchor your defense, which I don't think he is ready yet to be that prime like rim protector. Like that's why he's been like so good this year. He was the secondary guy with Jared Allen. It's not good. It's going to be a lot tougher against the Hawks now, and you could just see in like yesterday's game, if they're on fire and everyone is clicking, this Hawks team just knows how to pick up these wins. They were Eastern Conference finalists for a reason last year. And I think that experience plus just the unlucky fortunes for the Cavs, losing, Jared Allen, of course, Rubio earlier in the season, Colin Sexton earlier in the season. They've just been super unlucky. And I think the Hawks have the advantage going into this matchup. But in terms of the Heat, the 1-8 matchup, you have the Heat, who have been honestly like one of the most consistent teams in the East all season. Do you think it's a wash for both teams if they go against the Heat? Do you think the Heat get them easily?
So I don't think it's a wash per se, but I definitely think that Atlanta gives them a much better like run in terms of the series being a little bit more competitive. Again, I think the Jared Allen element definitely factors a lot into it. I think if Jared Allen is available for that series, maybe they are a bit more competitive overall. But I just think from a perimeter defense stance, this is where Miami gets to shine, right? In the playoffs, we're
Yeah.
talking about the physicality being at an all-time high. They have guys who can close games, whether it's Kyle Lowry, whether it's Jimmy Butler. They have Bam back, who's been playing at. Some would have argued if he was more healthy, would have been in the DPOY race, but just didn't really play enough games for it. Tyler Hero is like far and away leading in terms of six man of the year, and they're going to need him to produce offensively. And the funniest thing about Miami is we entered the year worried about their depth, and now they're entering the playoffs having depth issues in terms of who they're actually going to keep in their rotation.
Yeah.
Gabe Vincent is carved out time for himself. Caleb Martin, is Victor Oladipo going to be able to get time? Omer Yurtseven, Max Struess, like they have depth issues from the sense of like who is going to be allowed to play because
Yeah.
they have so many guys that have been able to produce this year. And with that kind of backing, along with the fact that we know defensively, we know what they represent, especially with guys like PJ Tucker and Bam holding things down on the inside and kind of on the perimeter as well. Man, I don't see Miami going out in the first round, bro, regardless of who they see.
I am completely on board with you there. Either one of these teams, the Hawks or the Cavs, Miami's going to really like that matchup. They really are. And we know how, like, we've seen this team, at least the majority of this team, how they're able in the bubble to go deep into the playoffs. Now adding Kyle Lowry, I mean, yes, they had Dragic in the past, but having someone with the championship pedigree, someone who knows like what it takes to like win a championship, be great on the defensive end, set up other guys. And at the end of the day, he can make a clutch shot if he is needed to. But they have so many guys on that team. I mean, Duncan Robinson's having a bad year, like per his standards, but that didn't matter. They could just add Max Strus into the lineup. They could throw in a Victor Oladipo if it really comes down to it. Like you said, they have like a riches on their bench, which we didn't think they had earlier in the season. But that's just a testament to I don't want to sound freaking cliche. Heat culture, like we don't want to
No,
like
seriously.
it's a real thing. And I think against either of these teams, yes, the Hawks I think will put up a bigger fight, especially if there's a possibility that John Collins comes back. Just having that extra scoring option will be great for the Hawks. But against either of these teams, even if they face the Cavs, their inexperience is going to definitely hurt them here. They're going to have some good games from Darius Garland, but the rest of the team, especially throwing a rookie in there, Evan Mobley, and right into the fire against one of the most aggressive teams in the league, is going to be extremely tough. And I think they really have the clear advantage against either one of the teams who go for the 8th seed. But Jalen, I'm gonna ask for two predictions for you. If the Hawks were to face the Heat were to face the Hawks, who would be your Who would be what would be your prediction there? And the same thing with the Cavs. What would be your prediction for Heat versus Cavs?
So I think if the Heat play Atlanta, I got the Heat in 6 games.
Mhm.
And if the Heat play the Cavaliers, I actually have the Cavs getting swept because I think Darius Garland is
Really?
good, but I just think that supporting cast against that Heat physicality is not going to look good. And I mean, don't get me wrong, these are two teams that are really good on the defensive end. And if they get Jared Allen back, that would definitely help them. But I just think that the Heat, this is kind of the time that the Heat have been waiting for all season long. Their defense is built for the playoffs. They have guys who are built for a playoff run. They have guys that have already gone on a playoff run as a part of this roster, and getting the 1 seed was like the cherry on top of it all because their roster was already built to make a run. But now their pathway, starting out with the 1-8 matchup, is probably the easiest start to to the playoffs that they could have possibly asked for.
Yeah, 100% there. And as for my predictions, I'm actually gonna be like I'm gonna agree with you for the Hawks series. I'm gonna say that the Heat win in 6. But for the Cavs, I will give them one game. I think one
Fair.
game, like, I'm gonna give them one game, just like maybe have them a gentleman sweep. The Heat are up 3-0. They give a game to the Cavs, and then they're gonna finish it off at home. But I think that's how the series is gonna go. Either way, the Heat definitely should have the advantage in either of the series. Now let's move on to this 2-7 matchup because this 2-7 matchup, unlike previous years, this is going to be interesting. 100%. We have the Boston Celtics as the number 2 seed facing off against the number 7 seeded. Yes, still sounds weird to me. Brooklyn Nets. Rematch of last year's playoffs, but the roles feel like they've been completely flipped. The Celtics were kind of a mess last year, being the 7th seed. I think they won one game against the Brooklyn Nets last year, if I remember correctly, and the Nets were just dominating. This year, the Nets had to deal with injuries, had to get their way into the 7th seed, but the Celtics turning it around in 2022 became the number 2 seed, 51 season. Jalon, what are you looking for in this matchup?
Man, so I think the biggest thing has to be like the wing play overall of Boston because they're gonna have to be able to go blow for blow with everything that Brooklyn represents offensively. We know that Brooklyn is still struggling from a defensive standpoint. That's why I think the whether Ben Simmons plays or not wild card is gonna be one of the most interesting storylines going into the postseason. Because I think if he does play, that puts Boston in a really interesting spot. But if he does not play, I think that actually gives Boston much more of a chance to be successful on that end of the floor. But the other thing is, Boston, since acquiring Derek White, and that feels so weird that that was like
Yeah.
actually that's actually been one of the bigger acquisitions from the trade deadline.
Hmm.
Since acquiring him, it seems as though their team, they can go into an 8 to 9 man rotation and they're never putting a net negative player on the floor at any time,
Yeah.
either on the offensive or the defensive end. There's
Mhm.
no rotation that they have where when you throw 5 guys out on the floor, you're worried that somebody's going to either get cooked on the defensive end or they're just a flat out liability on the offensive end. You have faith in just about everybody they put on the floor. Now, Robert Williams,
Yes.
X factor
Yes.
alert. There's reports that say that he may be able to come back during this series.
Yeah.
Reports that say that he could be back as soon as maybe game 3 or 4, which
Yeah.
does still put them in a positive light because one would assume, based on how crazy the series looks like it's going to be
Yeah.
going in, this series is not going to be over by game 4. And with
It
that being the
isn't.
case, if Robert Williams can come back, that could be a really net positive thing for them. But that's a huge if at the same time. Same thing as the if with Ben Simmons.
Yeah.
So I think those two X factors of like, is Ben gonna play? Is Robert gonna play? That I think that's gonna tip the scales in one or the other team's favor. And if they both don't play, then the question has to be: is peak Kevin Durant, Kevin Durant, right? Can Jason Tatum match peak Kevin Durant? I think if those two are playing at the same level, I'm giving the supporting cast of the Celtics the benefit of the doubt
Yeah.
10 times out of the 10. But if Jason Tatum cannot go blow for blow with Kevin Durant, then we're talking about otherworldly Durant having Ramadan
Yeah.
Kyrie next to him, and that's a tough one to ask, bro. That's a tough task.
That is definitely a tough task. And that's the thing now. We have Kyrie at full strength. We have KD at full strength. Those two guys alone whether Ben Simmons is there or not, can win them this series no matter what. But this is not the same Celtics team as last year. The defense, number one defense in the league. And like you mentioned earlier, no matter what lineup they have on the floor, they could trust them to bring it on the defensive end and just, keep the scoreboard ticking. You could just keep the scoreboard ticking while Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum get the rest. But in this matchup, you talked about the Ben Simmons, Robert Williams thing. Robert Williams has been one of their defensive anchors along with Marcus Smart throughout the entire season. And we've seen throughout the season how important he has been, especially as a rim protector. Him coming into the Celtics is basically like a plug and play. It's not like he's going to have to get used to the system or anything. He just goes in, he does his thing. Robert Williams, he'll have an immediate impact. Ben Simmons, on the other hand, hasn't played since Game 7 of the Philly-Atlanta series. And it just doesn't sit right with me that the first game he comes back as an NBA professional is on a new team. And what? I think the reports are Game 4 of the first round? What? You think that's going to, Ben Simmons, you're just going to get peak Ben Simmons right away? No, you're not.
Right.
You're not going to get peak Ben Simmons. Sure, he'll bring on the defensive end, but we don't know how he is. Is he confident in his shooting ability? Is he going to be able to, at least, be that facilitator in the offensive end? We don't know yet. And it doesn't help that this is not like him on the 76ers, where if you plug him back in, I mean, he kind of knows the system. Yes, it's been a whole year, but, you could just throw him in. They know how to play with him. These Nets players, do they know how to play with Ben Simmons yet? Mm-hmm. Are they? Is Kyrie gonna pass it out to him for three, and he's gonna be like, Ben, shoot it, and that's just not gonna happen. we don't know, and I think that's just that for me. It's what is gonna be key here, because the Nets, they do have the best player in the series in Kevin Durant, but for sure. But will the other guys step up? I mean, we've seen throughout the end of the season, KD and Kyrie go off for 30, 40-point games apiece, and they still lose by double digits. You know why? The rest of the guys just can't doesn't perform, and they cannot defend. That is the one thing. Without Ben Simmons, this team just cannot defend. And with the Celtics, they have the best defense in the league, but the difference with here is that they have compatible offensive players in Jason Tatum. Jaylen Brown is going to be absolutely massive in this series as well, because the Nets are going to focus a lot on Tatum. You could see a possibility that Brown averages near 30 points a game this series because of how much attention JT is getting. And that's the thing with the Celtics. The chemistry is there. They know how to play with each other. They know their defensive scheme. There's still too much question marks for me for Brooklyn, and even though they have a good chance of winning this, it's going to be tough for them, especially if they are really going for Ben Simmons, trying to come back into this lineup. No matter who they have on the court, their defense is going to be suspect. It's just going to be extremely tough either way. But in terms of prediction of the series, Jalon, who you got into this?
Yeah, man, I know. And throughout our conversation, it's kind of swayed me a little bit, but at the same time, I'm going to go with the pick that I made on my podcast. I got the Nets, but I got them in 7 games. I feel like at the end of the day, they have the best. At the end of the day, I feel like they're the best player in the series, and I hate to use that bail because sometimes it's never enough. But I feel like in this case, this is one of those where I still, again, the big X factor overall has to be Jason Tatum has played really well this season, really, really well, and I think that this Boston team is built strong enough to make a run. I think if they get past Brooklyn, right? I think they're one of those teams in the East that should be in that conversation as a real contender. I think they should even be in that conversation now. I had them. I did a little TikTok thing where I was like, are they a low-key dark horse contender that nobody's really giving a whole lot of credence to? But drawing Brooklyn, excuse me, that's such a tough one. It's so odd for them because Brooklyn is a team where, again, if you can get peak KD and you're saying to go win a series, it is hard to bet against that man regardless of the circumstances. Now, I think a team like Milwaukee that has somebody like Giannis, that is one where if you say blow for blow, peak for peak, who can hang, I feel more confident in a guy like Giannis to be able to hang. And then if you go supporting cast down the line, I think Milwaukee lines up better. I think when you look at Brooklyn versus Boston, I still have questions as to whether or not Jason Tatum can meet Kevin Durant's peak at that level. And if that can't happen, I still struggle to give Boston any kind of real credence. Now, granted, again, 7 games, but I got the Nets.
it was tough for me. It was tough for me because I could make an argument either way. I do like agree with your points. Kevin Durant is just like a whole like otherworldly player. It's hard to bet against them, but I just have too many questions for the supporting cast of the Brooklyn Nets, and that is why I'm gonna go with the Celtics. And this may shock some people. I'm going Celtics in 6. I'm
Ooh,
going
okay.
Celtics in 6. I think that Jason Tatum has proven this year. Him, honestly, you can consider him to be a top 5 MVP candidate. Just looking at like the overall season, and then with the rest of the Celtics crew there, Marcus Smart, this guy's gonna be all over Kyrie. He like even if he guards KD, I don't even consider that much of a mismatch. I think it's like just as much of a mismatch as it is for anyone else. They got Jaylen Brown who can score 25 points any like on any given night. You got smart defensive players with Al Horford, potentially Robert Williams. And then you got a bench, which they've been around the team for a while now. Apart from Derek White, they still got the Grant Williams, the Payne Pritchards. You got all those guys who's been with the team for a while. They know how to get it done. And now they're facing a Nets team with still a number of questions. They got a lot of question marks from their supporting cast. I don't like the idea of like uncertainty with a team, and I just think that the Celtics are more of a sure thing here. Yes, KD is that guy. Again, one of the best players in the league, but the Celtics, I think, just have enough to take him down, and I think they're actually going to take him down in 6. It's definitely going to be like one of those series that everyone's going to be tuning into, though. Everyone's going to be tuning into the series 100%. Next series, oh boy, let's. I know I can tell by your face already. You don't want to talk about this, but the number 3 Milwaukee Bucks taking on Jalen's number 6 Chicago Bulls. Now, one thing before I hand it over to you, Jalon, and you can go on about this series. The Bulls haven't beat the Bucks since December of 2018. The Bulls have not beat them since then. Giannis is on a 13-game winning streak against the Chicago Bulls, and this is highly impressive, mostly because of the fact they're in the same division, which means they have to face 4 times a year. So, Jalon, take it away.
Man, like, I mean, everything you detailed is kind of like the start of it, but like, I mean, the truth is, whether you're a Bulls fan or just somebody that's looking out on the outside, it's very easy to state. This is probably the worst case scenario playoff wise for the Chicago Bulls going into this
Yes.
postseason. It was I think, and this is no offense to, for example, this is no offense to like your Toronto Raptors, but I think from a matchup standpoint, I would have felt at least a bit more confident going into a series against Toronto or even Philly, for example. I think that would have been more of an ideal first round matchup. Catching Milwaukee is a real gut punch because this is a team that again has dominated us for a good like a good while now. And now like pretty much Bulls fandom is like preying on the strength that we can reinvigorate that 2015 2016 series where we took them down 4-2. And I just don't know if the power off the strength is going to be enough.
Yeah.
Realistically speaking, this Bucks team is obviously way different from that team back in 2015 2016. But our Bulls team is also, I think, taking significant dips back. I mean, from that
Yeah.
team as well, right? It's from a talent standpoint. And TV, we've had this conversation before, man. Like, I've had my fears. I pumped my chest out about the Bulls whenever I got the
Yeah.
chance. But you also know that I've tried to be as realistic about this team
Yeah.
this year as possible. And one of the things I even asked you was like, yo, if we're being real, DeMar has played out of his mind. Now, granted, the last month and a half, he hasn't, which is even
Yeah.
worse. Alex Caruso has missed time. Zach LaVine has dealt with his knee injury stuff. Lonzo Ball is officially out for the rest of the season with the way things are going on with him and his
Yeah.
leg. And I asked you, I said, like, yo, is it bad to say that DeMar is playing at his peak? The Bulls look the best that they've been in a while, and I still don't think it's enough for them to even win a series. Well, now you draw Milwaukee, and it looks
Yeah.
like there's no other better way to phrase it. Is that
Yeah.
even with all of that, I don't know how you get out of the first round playing the kind of basketball they've played over the last month and a half, and you draw this team of all teams.
Yeah, I mean, coming from the Bulls fan, he put it perfectly. I mean, if you look back at that 2015-2016 team, you had a front line of Taj Gibson and Joakim Noah, probably one of the best defensive front courts in the league at that time. Now you have Nikola Vucevic. And
Mm,
mm,
mm.
and the problem with this team, and this is where I think the Bucks are just going to completely dominate in the interior. You got Giannis, you got Brook Lopez, you got Bobby Portis, and your best interior defender is Nikola Vucevic. That is not going to sit right with me there. And look, the Bulls, look at it from like earlier on in the season when they were absolutely killing it. It was like what, December of this year. I think they were like the number one seed like at some point.
Yep.
DeMar was going off. Zach LaVine was playing at a high level. People knew that he was like a guaranteed all-star starter.
Mm.
Now everything has fallen back to the mean. DeMar, I'm telling you from a Raptor fan, and I love DeMar, my favorite player of all time. His stats are gonna dip in the playoffs. I'm gonna give you guys a warning now. His stats will dip in the playoffs, especially against a Milwaukee team who has probably one of the best, like has great defensive personnel, Giannis Antetokounmpo. And not just that, they have good perimeter guys in Grayson Allen. Of course, their star backcourt in Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday. Look, they're defending champions for a reason. They are, and they're against this Bulls team with sadly no Lonzo Ball. I think Lonzo Ball in the series would actually make a massive, massive difference. But I just don't see like a narrative, a scenario where the Bulls come out as victors in the series. I mean, what do you need for this? You need Vucevic to score 20 and like 25 and 10 a game. You need the best DeMar. You need the best. You need the best version of Zach LaVine, and along with that, you need the Bucks to kind of like struggle from like the 3-point line. We need a underwhelming series from Drew, Chris Middleton, and like Giannis Antetokounmpo. You need them to like, not average 35 and 10 against you every single night. And even still, like, is that even enough to beat them? We don't even know. And that's the thing about this. I mean, again, kind of like the Cavs, the Bulls got bit with the injury bug pretty badly this season. And it's been unfortunate, especially because even if you look at the rest of the top four in the East, the Miami Heat, the Boston Celtics, the Bull and the Philadelphia 76ers, I would have liked the Bulls in any of those other matchups. But against the Milwaukee Bucks, that is definitely the worst luck of the draw. And man, I mean, we're going to get into our predictions really quick, but I don't think it's going to be a long series. I hate to say this, man. It's not going to be a long series, but Jalon, unbiased opinion. I don't, it doesn't really matter. What do you have in the series?
Yeah, man. So like just to kind of like clean that whole
Yeah.
thing up too, like one of the things that you mentioned was the defensive personnel thing. Like it's like again going back to like the worst case scenario when you can say you will put Drew on DeMar, we'll put Chris on Zach, we'll put Giannis on Vooch, and then kind of just fill in the blanks alongside those three. You really put us in a strapped situation. You know what I mean? Because offensively, outside of those three, we do struggle a lot. And I'll even take it a step further. I would argue that right now, from a health standpoint, our best overall defender probably is Io, unfortunately. And that goes back to your point about what you said about Evan Mobley. If the Cavs were to make the 8 seed going up against Miami, it's like you're throwing Io DeSumo into like the fire of the playoffs. And don't get me wrong, he's been guarding some of the best perimeter guys in the league all year. Billy Donovan has tasked that on him, and he has definitely rose to the occasion in a handful of games. This is just unfortunately one of those series where he has not really fared very well against Milwaukee throughout this season. And that is a terrible example of just things to come in terms of what can happen. So I'm going to do the same thing I did on my podcast, which is give you my biased answer and my unbiased answer. So my biased answer, the one that I'm thinking with my heart here, is that the Bulls win in 7 games. It's going to take 7 games to get it done. It's going to take heroics and straight theatrics from DeMar DeRozan. And we're probably the way it's probably going to even happen is we're going to have to win all 3 home games that we play. And we're going to need heroics in game 7 from DeMar DeRozan in order to pull the series out. That is the realistic, realistic yet unrealistic belief of a Bulls fan in terms of being able to win the series. Now, if I'm thinking with my head and just strictly looking at matchup to matchup wise, I think the Bulls get a game. And I think it's a gentleman's sweep at the best. If I'm just being fair, because I don't think the Bulls get swept because I don't think we're that bad, even with Milwaukee being the worst matchup we could have gotten. But I don't see this series being extremely competitive with the way things look on paper.
Yeah, I mean, when we get into the Raptors series, I'm gonna base. I've actually the same thing. I have my bias and unbiased, and we're gonna get into that bit later. But I have no bias here. Bulls versus Bucks. I really was gonna think it's gonna be a sweep, but my official prediction is Bucks in 5. I think one of you. I think you get one game at home,
Yeah,
whether it's game 3 or game 4. If you want a chance, you probably have to get game 3 if anything. But the worst part is that the Bulls' biggest weakness it's the Bucks' biggest strength, and
exactly.
that's what it really comes down to. Giannis is gonna have no problem in there. I know Bulls fans love Patrick Williams, and they tout him as the potential Giannis stopper. I mean, here you go. You have at least 4 games to deal with Giannis Antetokounmpo. Let's see if he can hold him to under 35 and 10 a game. But it's again a tall task for a second year player. But it's unfortunate for the Bulls because they had such a great start to the year. Just again, the injury bug, just unfortunate for that team. Final series in the East, and I think this is the one where I I love being the underdog as a Raptor fan, but I think there's too many people picking us in the series, which kind of worries me. There's too many people picking us in the series, and it kind of worries me. But we have the number 4 seeded Philadelphia 76ers going up against my Toronto Raptors, the number 5 seed. Jalon, I'm gonna go into probably this whole bias plus unbiased thing in a bit, but from someone with no bias in this matchup, what do you like in this series, and who like what are some of the things you're gonna be looking out for?
Man, so I hate to kind of do this, but like I gotta go with what you were saying earlier. Like the level of confidence in people like that people have for Toronto in this series is kind of through the roof right now, and I sort of feel kind of the same way. I don't know if my pick is gonna really reflect that, just because I think my pick is going to just kind of go with more of like a talent led perspective.
Yeah,
But if you look at everything with Toronto, man, I mean, you're talking about one of the best rebounding teams in the league versus one of the worst rebounding teams in the league. Which,
yeah,
oddly enough, with Joel Embiid being an MVP candidate and
yeah,
everything, one of the best centers in the league, yet from a team rebounding standpoint, their team blows on the boards. You know what I mean? As
yeah.
opposed to you guys are one of the smallest rosters across the board, yet you guys gang rebound with the best of them, one
I
of the
know.
best offensive rebounding
Yeah,
teams.
but before you go forward, that stat is kind of weird because we're the best offensive rebounding team in the league, bottom half defensive rebounding. But yeah, you can go ahead. It's really weird.
Yeah, man, it's one of those things that's just really odd about the play style. But the other thing too is just like the wing play that you guys have across the board is bizarre from a defensive standpoint. And against a team, I would argue, we made that same statement with Milwaukee versus the Bulls, where it was like the last team the Bulls wanted to see was Milwaukee. I would say that the Sixers, the last team they might have wanted to see was you guys,
100%.
honestly, because not only just from like a past experience standpoint, right? Because
Yeah,
obviously for a player like Joel Embiid, for example, maybe the PTSD seeps in a little,
yeah,
maybe, not sure.
maybe.
But at the same time, you just look at their perimeter defense. You look at the fact that James Harden hasn't been playing well as of late. Tyrese Maxey is still kind of coming into his own as a point guard.
Yeah,
Matisse Thybulle is a net negative offensively, even though he's like an otherworldly defensive player. Tobias Harris has been pedestrian at best for most
yeah,
of the year. So it does seem like everything points to you guys coming out with the upset. It's very like NCAA March Madness esque that you're kind of
yeah,
like picking the underdog, and it like to be like people pick the underdog to be different. And it almost feels like now you have to like kind of weigh it. It's like, oh, do you go with the group think, or do you somehow become the oddball by picking the favorite, And so that's one of the weird conversations with these two teams. But this TV, I gotta tell you,
yeah.
out of all the series in this postseason, I actually think this tops out as like the second most interesting series in the entire postseason. Really.
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, looking at the playoff schedule, the NBA knows this too because like on game 1, we have the 6 p.m. time slot, which is like prime time
Prime time.
on that Saturday night. So the NBA knows that this is the matchup that people want to see,
Yeah.
and it feels weird as a Raptor fan to be in that position. I mean,
Mhm.
you talked about it. This lineup should not work. This Raptors lineup should not work. The lack of 3-point shooting, the lack of like go-to bucket getters, but somehow the Raptors have made it to the 5th seed. And the biggest reason is honestly coaching and just scheme in general. Nick Nurse is a genius. I know why. We could see why the Lakers want him, but the problem is everyone else in the league wants him. It's freaking Nick Nurse. He's become that type of coach. But in this matchup, I want to start off with the 76ers side of things because I do think that Joel Embiid is probably the worst matchup here just because we have no size to go up against him. He should still average like 30 and like 14 in the series. But the biggest question mark here, and all the pressure, all the eyes are going to be locked into this one guy, James Harden.
Yeah.
How is he going to perform in the playoffs? The last 14 games of the season, he averaged 17 points a game and 9 rebounds. Is that James Harden statistics? Not even close to what we know he could be. And I know this is a weird stat too, but I did see this on StatViews. James Harden has not dunked in a 76er jersey yet. He has not dunked, which is really, really odd. But I think that's indicative to kind of his explosiveness just not being there as it was in previous years. He's not getting by opponents as quick as he did in the past. And we know from previous years that James Harden has like 1 or 2 posters a year that kind of remind us that he's pretty athletic for someone that we don't really think of like as an athletic guy. He doesn't have that this year. And I think that a mixture with that, their lack of depth, and also the fact that Matisse Thybulle can't come to Canada. He can't come to Canada, y'all. Like that's another like aspect which is like really, I know it sounds really funny, but he can't come to the country, which is hilarious. But at the end of the day, I mean, the Raptors, out of all the guys in the top 4 they wanted, we got him. The 76ers, for all the teams that they didn't want in the playoffs, they got the Raptors. And I think in this matchup, what's going to be absolutely key for them is just confusing the Sixers as much as possible. And I know Nick Nurse has the ability to do that. Just throwing some funky lineups, throwing like different like defensive schemes at the 76ers, just confuse the hell out of them and just get them rattled. I know they have the ability to do that, but my issue with the Raptors, and I think like what I think people are kind of putting too much emphasis on, like are not talking about enough, is besides Siakam and Van Vliet, there's not really anyone that can create their own shot. And I think that's what's kind of worrisome for the Raptors team. Are they going to be able to outscore the 76ers 4 times out of 7? It's going to be something like extremely like, even as like a Raptor fan, that's something I'm kind of worried about because Siakam, number 1 guy, first time going into the playoffs. We don't know how he's going to perform. Freddie has been nursing this ankle/leg injury for the past 2 months now, which is something to look out for. And I mean, we talked about Mobley. We talked about other players like being in their first playoff series. This is Scotty Barnes' first playoff series, so this is also going to be something that we're going to have to look out for. Is he going to be able to rise to the occasion? That plus the even like though like I think we have more depth in the 76ers, it's not that much better. It's something like where like Nick Nurse is going to have to play like 8-9 guys every single game. I don't even know if it's going to get to 9 games eventually, but in terms of a potential upset, this is the best chance the Raptors have. Yeah. This is the best chance the Raptors have. And I think with the way they're able to get the 76ers rattled, not just this year, last year they got a win over them, holding Joel Embiid to like very low numbers. Even the game in in the season before that, they held Joel Embiid to 0 points before. Do you remember that game?
Yeah.
You remember that game? Because it's happened in the past. They know how to handle this 76er team. And I think that the coach advantage is massive. Doc Rivers has proven that he really cannot, like he's not that great as playoff series go along. Nick Nurse has the advantage in that. All signs, like you said, all signs point to Toronto winning. But I just I don't know. There's just too many like this. I like being the underdog. I like it when the Raptors are being doubted. But this feels 50-50 to me. So in terms of this prediction, I'm excited to hear what you have to say here, but who do you have winning and why?
So I have the Sixers. I have the Sixers in 7 games. I think that because of the whole upset factor, that there's no way this series is short. One thing we didn't even talk about the fact too is that like OG Anunoby is back, shaking off rust, mind you, but he did play in the season finale, so that does indicate that he's going to be a guy that is going to be a factor in this series. See, that's something that we can take to our bank, unlike guys like Robert Williams or guys like Ben Simmons, for example, that we had questions about whether they would be playing. OG should be available. That should be a boost going into the playoffs for you guys. But again, the Fred VanVleet injury thing, which I don't think will hold him back, but is something worth factoring in. The Matisse Thybulle point, I think in its own right is hilarious, but also true in terms of how extensive this series could get. Because look, granted, you guys don't have home court advantage, but in those 3 games where we gotta head to Canada, you're taking one of the best perimeter defensive players, not just like on the team, but in the
The
league,
league, yeah.
basically out of the series, right? For
Yeah.
3 games out of the series, that's a non-factor. So, I mean, and it's funny because if you look down the line, like if Toronto were to make a run, like it that there's teams like Brooklyn, for example, that would also run into similar problems like
The
this too.
Boston
So
Celtics too. The Boston
yeah,
Celtics
yeah, Boston too. Yeah. So it's like you look down the line, it's weird. Like Toronto has a really interesting like home court
advantage.
advantage in their own sense that like if they can kind of make a boost for this, like some teams are gonna run into some issues where they're gonna be looking at their guys and asking them, like, yo, I know we're in the middle of a playoff series and we're supposed to be focused on the game, but like, yo, do you want to win or what? Like,
Yeah.
within their own locker room. So it's funny how that turmoil can be, brought up just by like the city's mandates and everything. But
Yeah.
just overall talent wise, man, look, James Harden he has all the I mean, I plan on doing an article on this right before the playoffs
Yeah.
starts where I focus on the 5 players entering the playoffs with the most pressure, and James Harden easily, far and away, is the top player in that
Number
grouping.
by far, by
And
far.
and Joel Embiid might even be top 3. He's been chirping about if they don't make me MVP, they just don't like me. Everything else under the sun in terms of how his season has went this year. Well, guess what? I know that the playoffs does not affect your MVP candidacy, but it sure as heck can prove whether you did or did not deserve to win it. It can
Yeah.
do that. And so, with that being the case, I just don't see them folding in the first series. That's a tough
Yeah.
one, man. With that kind of pressure, you got Philly fans on your back too. If you had enough pressure from NBA fans just on the
Yeah.
outside who are not even
Yeah.
invested in you, but
Yeah.
Philly fans too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man, you got to at least get out the first round with the way this season is went. Even with all the Ben Simmons conundrums, you got
Yeah.
to get out of the first round with this one. And so with that, it might be blind faith. It might just be leaning on storylines to carry, but you got to get out the first round if you're Philly with the way this season is went.
Yeah. And for my prediction, do I go with my heart? Do I go with my head? My heart says Raptors in 6.
Okay.
My heart says Raptors in 6.
Okay.
My head says 76ers in 7, but I'm not, but my head just changed. I'm gonna go
Okay.
Raptors in 7 as my final prediction. Raptors
Okay.
in 7. I'm going into the narrative, man. I think that Nick Nurse literally lives rent free in Joel Embiid's head right now. And honestly, like, I'm gonna tell you right now, there's gonna be a lineup on the floor that's gonna go on a 10-0 run for the Raptors with Gary Trent Jr., Scotty Barnes, Chris Boucher, Precious Achua, and Pascal Siakam. Sounds weird? Yes. But that's going to go on a 10-0 run at some point in this series, and that's going to confuse the hell out of people watching the game. But that's how the Raptors roll. That's how we roll. I'm taking the Raptors in 7.
Okay.
I'm going into the narrative. People have too much faith in us, but I'm going to be part of that. Let's go. Raptors in 7. Let's get it. We're getting this win. I'm going to game 3 as well. We're going to get a dub in home because Matisse Thybulle is going to be watching at his home. He can't even enter the airport. Come on.
Yo,
Okay,
that's crazy.
I know.
Oh, man.
But that's the East. Let us know down below what you guys think of those picks. Let's move on swiftly to the Western Conference. And stating like we did for the for the 1-8 matchup there, we're also going to be talking about the play-in game because on Friday we have the play-in game with the Clippers who lost to the Timberwolves, and which was one of the craziest games of the season. If you guys watched it, that was absolutely insane. And then the Pelicans who took care of the Spurs. They made a late comeback late in that game, but it just wasn't enough. But we got Clippers and Pels. Jalon, what are you looking for in that game? Who do you think is going to win?
Bro, I just think in a game where Carl Anthony Towns was so bad, especially like in the first half in particular, horrible. Like, I mean, really, really bad. I gotta pull the statistics up again. 2 points, 0 of 7 from the floor, 0 of 2 from 3, and 4 fouls. Carl Anthony Towns did foul out of that game against the Clippers. And you fold with those kind of circumstances from I mean, I know Ant Edwards has been on a tear this year, but your best play, we're talking about Minnesota's best player pretty much is on ice most of the game, and the Clippers fold. Man, I gotta be honest. With that kind of background noise going on, of that being the way that you're even in this playing scenario to begin with, I mean, in terms of like the second game, I gotta go with New Orleans, man. I think that New Orleans is just playing better basketball right now. I think they got a better draw by getting San Antonio first, but CJ McCollum has been playing really well. Brandon Ingram has played relatively well so far this year. Watch out for Herb Jones defensively, because I
Yeah.
think he's gonna be the primary defender on like a Paul George in that game.
Mhm.
Um, and I know from a talent standpoint, this should be like Clippers all day, right? PG probably,
Yeah.
at least from a talent standpoint, is best player on the floor, but though it's the way they lost to Minnesota. It's not that they lost to Minnesota, because if
Yeah.
you listen to me and Ryan's podcast throughout the season, like we even entered the year saying, watch out for Minnesota. They're gonna be a
Yeah.
sneaky one. So
You
we
told
had
me
faith in them.
you told me on that podcast on
Yeah,
that one
man.
podcast.
We
Yeah.
said, watch out for them. They're gonna be a
Yeah.
sneaky team this year. Here they are, seventh seed now. But the way they lost to Minnesota in that environment, with the way Minnesota plays, specifically more so from Karl Anthony Towns, that just zaps the faith out of me when it comes to what they're gonna do. I wouldn't be surprised if they won, but if we're just going based off what we've seen so far, I gotta go with New Orleans.
Yeah. And yeah, no, it was definitely a tough environment. But I think the biggest thing in that like Timberwolves game, firstly, I'm gonna speak on Karl Anthony Towns. The best thing that could have happened to Timberwolves team that day was that he fouled out. That was the best possible thing that could happen, because he was a detriment to that team, like
Mhm.
throughout the entire game. Because the Clippers just, that defensive scheme just completely threw him off. But luckily for the Timberwolves, D'Angelo Russell 29 points, 30 points from Anthony Edwards, and Pat Bev playing like it's freaking Game 7 of the NBA Finals. But that's Pat Bev every game. That's the thing. No, that's like literally Pat Bev every game. But honestly, congrats to the Timberwolves. I had my doubts throughout the season, but congrats, they finally made it. But in terms of this matchup, Clippers versus Pelicans, I do understand your points. But I think the biggest factor to why the Clippers kind of like folded, especially late in that game, was, did you hear the Timberwolves crowd? Like, oh, bro, they were
Yo,
going
they
nuts.
were there.
They were there. And
They
I think
were
that,
there.
and I just think that just that honestly just threw the Clippers all the way off. And like you saw like those like really bad turnovers late at the end of the game. I mean, that last Patrick Beverly steal, like goodness gracious, like the crowd was like was insane, which is absolutely insane. And I think now that they're home, the circumstances are different. They can calm down a little bit. It's an area that they know. They've been in this scenario before where they had to go win or go home. I think the Clippers can still pull it out. I think the Clippers, they do have the best player playing the series in Paul George. The Pels do have CJ McCollum, who has been absolutely on fire as of like ever since he came there, and they also have Brandon Ingram. But their defense for me is just kind of too suspect, and then we know that the Clippers are at least solid on both ends of the court, and that's the reason I have them like winning the series. But really, again, it's a 1-game series; it can go either way. The Clippers can have another bad game, and the Pelicans can take advantage. But at the end of the day, I think I'm gonna go with the Clippers. But in terms of the series, we have the Phoenix Suns, and the Phoenix Suns are in this like scenario where they just feel like they're the god of the NBA right now. Like they just feel like they're just like so good on like on either side of the court, and against either of these teams, it feels like they have a clear advantage against both of them. I mean, Jalon, who do you got winning? Like, who do you have winning in a series between the Suns and any of these two teams?
I mean, I got the Phoenix Suns regardless of which team they catch. I think that maybe out of the Clippers and New Orleans, the Clippers perimeter play is probably built best to give Phoenix a little bit more trouble than maybe New Orleans. But I either way, I mean, I got Phoenix winning either series, and I would say I probably got them winning either series in about 5 games. I think Phoenix, like you said beforehand, has been like the kings of the NBA from a dominant standpoint so far this year. They've done it in every way possible. They've missed Chris Paul for time. They've missed Devin Booker for time. They've missed Cam Johnson for time. Obviously, DeAndre Ayton is one of those players that isn't like a takeover guy for them, but they're gonna need
Yeah,
him to play really well in this playoff run the same way he played in last year's playoff run. And mind you, he's playing for money because
yeah,
he's going into this offseason as a restricted free agent, and
yeah,
they were already playing with that man as he was supposed to get, his rookie extension coming into this year.
yeah.
Now, here we are, number one seeded Phoenix Suns team. If this Suns team makes a run, he goes back to the table as the center of this team that helped them make that run. he's gonna have all his chips in the middle of the table, expecting a bag, and if it's not from Phoenix, it's coming from somebody. You know,
Yeah. Mhm.
so this is a Phoenix team that definitely is playing motivated, especially with the fact that they lost in the finals last year. And TV, I don't know if you fully agree with this, but a lot of people kind of are under this notion, and I kind of stand by it as well. Is with the state of the West this year, this may arguably be not just Phoenix's best chance, but like honestly, maybe even Chris Paul's best chance at a championship ever. And I'm even arguing that again, like in comparison to like the old Clippers teams, that 2015, 2016, I think a year it was, or twenty
Yeah.
sixteen, 2017 year against the Warriors that everybody said they could have won the championship
Yeah.
that season. I'm saying if there was any chance for CP3 to win the chip in terms of the pathway to get there, it's probably this year with the way things look.
Yeah, and I have to 100% agree with this. And even like with your point against the Suns against either of these two teams, I think it's going to be a pretty easy matchup for either or. I mean, the Clippers,
Mhm.
Kawhi Leonard's missing. It's a different sort of team. And yes, they did face against each other in the Western Conference Finals last year. But this Suns team is more mature. This Suns team is deeper. And they just feel like they're on like a completely different level, even from last year, which is like a scary side for any of these West teams. So whether against the Clippers or the Pels, I mean, these teams will score a bit. They can try to defend all they want. I mean, the Suns are just too deep. They got too many guys who can like get them buckets, who can like stay on the floor and not be a net negative. And against like these Pelicans Clippers teams, you're facing against one of the best defenses in basketball, which is also a very scary side. Whether you're CJ McCollum, whether you're Paul George, it's going to be extremely tough for both of these teams to even honestly get a game on this Phoenix team. But I kind of know where both of these predictions are going. But Jalon, against either of these teams, who do you got and why?
Yeah, definitely got Phoenix in 5 games, regardless of the team.
Really?
No doubt in my mind. I think it's just one of those things where they're just too good. They're a team on a mission right now. And like I said, with the pathway looking like it is, I mean, if you just look at it, and we'll kind of get into it like as we go through the other series, but if you look at some of these other teams and what they're dealing with or what their quote unquote biggest question marks are, you
Yeah.
compare that to what Phoenix is doing right now and their lack of question marks. Your biggest thing that you ask Phoenix right now is, can Chris Paul stay healthy for a playoff run again, like he did
Yeah.
last year, coming off the whole finger thing after the
Yeah.
first, couple of games with the Lakers?
Yeah.
Can he be as healthy as he was last season? But that's such an if, and it's such an extreme if. Don't get me wrong, it's a significant blow to them, but it's such an extreme if for them, as opposed to some of these other teams that we're gonna go through who their if, ands, or buts are things we can look at right now and know are going to impact them in the very series they're playing in the first round.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. I think for this 1-8 matchup, if they're going up against the Pelicans, I see it's a sweep. I think it's just like a plain simple. Phoenix is going to take care of business, and against the Clippers, I'll give the Clippers one game. I'm going to say the Clippers go in 5, just because of their experience, but just because of the coaching of Ty Lue. I think they're going to be able to get a game. But either way, they got the best coach in the league. They got the best team in the league. One of the best shooting guards in the league. This team is just great. This team is just great, and honestly, I mean, we're gonna talk about this in the series. There's just like not there's very little to no question marks for the Suns team. This team is just so good up and down the roster. I think they're gonna take advantage. They're gonna take care of whoever they face in that first round. Moving on to the 2-7 matchup, and man, this matchup is gonna be fun. This matchup is going to be fun. We got the Memphis Grizzlies taking on the number 2 seeded Memphis Grizzlies taking on the number 7 Minnesota Timberwolves. Jalon, two young teams, two teams wanting to make a statement in these playoffs. What are some things you're looking for in this series?
Man, the chirping is going to be ridiculous.
Oh,
Oh
ridiculous.
my goodness. I mean, just off top, I mean, Patrick Beverly versus you name it on Memphis, because from a, poke your chest out, feeling yourself standpoint, Memphis is not divulged of any player on that team who is, self-confident at all. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? This is a team that has poked their chest out throughout the entire season. Everybody from Desmond Bain to John Morant, Dylan Brooks across the board has said something to let the league know they're not scared of anybody. They're not worried about anybody. They think they're as good as their record shows, and they're ready now, as opposed to where some people think they're still too young. Minnesota, to me, man, the biggest thing that I'm going to watch out for, and I think it's an odd one because he's not their best player at all. He doesn't have that much influence on them outside of the defensive end. But I think if Minnesota does not embody the type of swag and the type of overachiever belief
Yeah.
that Patrick Beverly walks around with, Minnesota's going to get swept. If they do not come out with their chest poked out the way Memphis does, because talent wise, I would argue Memphis is deeper, but talent wise, these two teams can go back and forth.
Yeah.
Easily.
Mhm.
But then it just comes down to who is coming out with the right confidence and who is coming out with the right mentality. Memphis, they feel like they belong. They feel like they've been here, they've cut their teeth. The last 2 seasons, they've only made progress. And now here they are. This is like peak level, what you would love to see from a young team like this, right? This is almost like reminiscence of like old OKC Thunder days in terms of just being ahead of schedule with a superstar in his rookie contract still, right?
Yeah.
Minnesota, on the other hand, we saw the way they acted against the Clippers. This is a team that is just happy to be there, excited that they crossed the threshold that, it's been a couple seasons since the last time they actually even were a playoff factor. Now they're here, and the city is happy to see them there, but one has to wonder if they are really ready. I think that Minnesota, out of these two young squads, Minnesota is probably the team that is coming in looking the least ready to get active in a playoff series. And I worry about that. But you know who's always ready for smoke? Patrick Beverly. You know what I mean? So if they come out with his thought, if they come out with his mentality, they come out with his bravado, this could be a long series.
Yeah.
If they don't, Memphis gonna get them boys out of there quick.
Yeah. And then there's and the thing about these two teams, like you could just tell by the way that they're run, like kind of the different type of like swagger they have for each team. And with the Grizzlies, they've got it in the wins. They've got it through like just like being there for each other. Like no matter what, whether Jaws have the court on the court, they are able to get these W's. They're playing for each other. The Wolves, they have the biggest chip on their shoulder, probably out of like anyone in the playoffs right now. When you have Patrick Beverly leading that team, he's the one going to be barking at everyone. I mean, like you need a right in the head. Everyone needs to have that same confidence. Everyone has to have that same swagger that Pat Bev has going into every single game for them to even have a chance in this series. These are two young teams wanting to prove themselves, and honestly, either like one of these teams that they get out of the series, they're gonna be looked at a lot differently. I'll tell you that 100%. But in the series, expect a lot of trash talk. Expect a lot of technical fouls because that's what's gonna happen throughout the series.
Yup.
We're going to see those refs in front of those monitors plenty of times this series. And look, the matches I'm like really like most excited to see, Pat Bev versus Ja 24/7. I mean, how is Ja going to how is he going to honestly respond to what Patrick Beverly is going to give him all series long? I mean, that's going to be definitely a fun matchup. And then on the other end, I mean, Dylan Brooks, we've seen him like guard Curry literally 24/7. If you remember the play-in tournament last year where they defeated the Warriors, this guy was stuck to Curry like white on rice, man. This guy was on him like 24/7. I know he fouled out in that game, but he will be stuck to either D'Angelo Russell or Anthony Edwards the entire game. Most likely going to be Anthony Edwards, but he's going to be on him the entire game. And with Anthony Edwards having this his second season, first time being in the playoffs, how is he going to respond to that? I'm not sure because Dylan Brooks is a damn good defender, and he's going to make sure to like make it as difficult as possible for Anthony Edwards. But the Grizzlies are the better team. They have the deeper team. And ultimately, I think that they are definitely favorites in the series. But if the Timberwolves want a chance, Cat needs to play massive. He needs to play massive. And we at least like they got away with one, honestly. Let's be honest. In the play-in tournament with talent being that bad and having that performance from the rest of the guys, they got away with that. You're not going to get away with that against the Grizzlies. You're just not going to. And Cat needs to look at that Steven Adams matchup, that Jaren Jackson matchup, and just eat. I know they're two great defensive guys, but he has to look to get his own shot. We need to have him have that 26 and 10 season like he's having all season long, if they even want a chance in this. Because as much as you want to say Anthony Edwards is a great player, sitting with D'Angelo Russell, it's not their team yet. It's not Anthony Edwards' team yet. It's still Cat's team. Whether that happens in the future or not, we have to wait and see. But he is that guy right now. He needs to dominate inside the paint, and he has to make it so the Grizzlies are going to have to send doubles and triple teams at him, kind of the same way that teams do for Joel Embiid and Jokic. He needs to play on that level if they want to have a chance. But at the end of the day, the Grizzlies, we've seen what they could do. They have the coaching advantage in Taylor Jenkins over Chris Finch. And no matter who's out on the floor, you have to be like focused 24/7 if you're the Timberwolves, no matter who they have on that court. So I think that's something they definitely have to watch out for. But in this series, Jalon, the 2-7 matchup, Grizzlies versus Wolves, who do you have and why?
I got Memphis 4-1, dude. And
Memphis
that
4-1.
man,
Nice.
I know that might seem a little aggressive, especially because these two teams are young, and there's always the if Cat snaps, Lord knows, right?
Yeah.
But the if ands or buts with Cat, the fact that Memphis has two guys in both Steven Adams and Jaren Jackson Jr. that they can throw at him, Xavier Tillman too off the bench
Yeah.
is another guy they have rotationally that they can use. The fact that they have guys from Desmond Bain to Dylan Brooks, they've got DeAnthony Melton, they've got Zaire Williams, rookie Zaire Williams, who's really giving them solid minutes at the wing
Yeah.
position during this season. Ja Morant, obviously, who we saw in his playoff debut last year, basically was a one-man army versus Utah.
Yeah.
So they have everything that you need to combat a Minnesota team. And on top of that, look, let's not get it twisted. I know these two teams are young and the expectations from a championship standpoint are still a bit low for both of these teams, even with Memphis being a 2 seed. But if with the kind of way that Memphis has carried themselves throughout this season, the only way you get somebody to take you seriously as a championship contender is if you get these boys out of here quick. Because if this series is even remotely competitive, it doesn't get any easier from here, right?
Yeah.
In the very next round, you're looking at either Golden State or the Denver Nuggets. Even
Yeah.
with Denver being the way they've been this season without Jamal Murray, without Michael Porter Jr., you still look at them and you say, hey, man, but they got that guy who might be the 2-time MVP, you
Yeah.
know? So
Yeah.
you gotta tell yourself, like, yo, it does not get any easier from here. So if you can't handle Minnesota, who's just glad to be a part of the ride, what do you do with some of these other teams who are actually in the mix for this championship contender pot? We've all got a couple of teams in. So I think with the way Memphis has carried themselves, they gotta get Minnesota out of here quick to really show us that they mean business. And I think they have the capability of doing that. So I got them winning in 5.
You have them winning in 5. Interesting. Earlier today, I was like trying to convince myself that the Timberwolves could make this a series. I think that the Patrick Beverley aspect is going to be extremely massive, and especially with them trying to kind of embody him as well. But the thing about embodying Patrick Beverley is that sometimes there's no chill. Sometimes there's no chill whatsoever. And sometimes you kind of need that level-headed guy on the court for them. And honestly, for the Timberwolves, I don't know where that is because Patrick Beverley is technically their vocal leader and all that. And look, it's good to play 110% every single possession. But sometimes you just need someone to calm down the situation. Is D'Angelo Russell that guy? I'm not sure. I mean, he kind of looked like that in the post-game interview after the game, but I don't know where that's going to come from. I agree with you. If the Grizzlies want to be taken seriously, they're going to have to win in pretty quick fashion. So I think I'm going to have to agree with you. I'm going to go with Grizzlies in 5. Ja Morant may have some trouble with Patrick Beverley just because he's just going to get under his skin constantly. But luckily for him, it's not like last year where he has to be a one-man army. Desmond Bain has been a near 20-point per game scorer. Jaren Jackson is healthy this year, which is a big plus from last year. A massive, massive plus. And they have a deep team. Steven Adams, one of the best creators in the league. I think that's going to actually help out Ja a lot. And they have a deep bench. This Grizzlies team, I think a lot of people are kind of doubting them. I think that they're honestly just as good of a chance as anyone that's not the Suns right now. I think they have just as good of a chance. And I think they're going to take business here. Give me the Grizzlies to win in 5. Should be a fun series, though. I think there's going to be a lot of like we said, a lot of technicals, a lot of chippy play. But again, these are two of some of the most athletic teams in the league. We're going to definitely see a bunch of highlights, and I think it's going to be definitely a fun matchup. Moving on to the series, to the next series, the 3-6 matchup, Golden State and the number 3 spot taking on the 6-seeded Denver Nuggets. Jalon, both these teams have their injuries. Both these teams have a lot of question marks. But what are you looking for in the series?
Man, I mean, the easiest thing has to be seeing Steph, Clay, and Draymond on the floor for more than like 10 minutes, right? Like, because I
Yeah.
mean, that's been the thing, right? I mean, they've barely played as a trifecta on the floor in a while, and I don't
Yeah.
even think the entire totality of it is, you know, more than 10 to 20 minutes in the totality of the season because Steph's missed time, Clay obviously, and then Draymond as of late, Steph as of late, of course, as
Yeah.
well. Like they've just never been able to put it all together. But also, you look at the plus minus stuff, like Steph, Clay, and Jordan Poole on the floor is an OD combo from an
Yeah.
offensive standpoint. Their plus minus is ridiculous, favoring them by a landslide in that regard. So it's we know who Denver is. Like, I think we've come to a conclusion, especially without those other two guys, and our understanding that those two guys are more than likely not coming back for the playoffs. Talking about MPJ and Jamal Murray, we know who Denver is. But like the question that needs answering in order for us to really like feel confident about one team versus the other is like what version of Golden State are we getting? If we are getting full click Golden State, oh man, this should be light work. I'm not saying, sweep, but
Yeah.
like this should be 5 games, 6 at the worst, right?
Yeah.
But if we get like iffy Golden State, we're getting weird Steph Curry decision making Golden State, we're getting like quiet Clay Thompson Golden State. I mean, this could go 7 games, and I hate to say this because I still think that Steph Curry is the best point guard in the league, but if we go to a game 7, I'm saying the best player on the floor is I'm saying the best player on the floor is Nikola Jokic.
Yeah.
And at that being the case, I'm taking them to win game 7 and Denver comes out of this thing.
Yeah. And that is exactly the point I want to hit here. Which version of Golden State are we getting? Because if we're getting second half Golden State, then we don't know where the series is going to go. We have no idea where the series is going to go. But if we got first half Golden State, if we have the Clay, Steph, Draymond combo, which from the 2015, 2016, that the whole dynasty. If we get that, Golden State honestly could be as dangerous as the Phoenix Suns if we get them at their best. But the difference between that and what they've had in the last like half of the season is just like second to none. And I think the biggest factor here is, yes, we're gonna have some question marks, especially in the first round, because Steph is gonna have to like reacclimate himself back into this rotation. They're gonna need to put. You mentioned that lineup between Poole, Thompson, and Curry. Poole needs to play like 34 minutes a game. We
Yeah.
need to see Poole out there a lot, because when things are going to start to slow down with Steph Curry, Clay, and stuff like that, because there's going to be that like 1 or 2 game period, especially in the beginning, where they're going to have to try to get used to it again. Poole, they need someone to get like another shot creator and maker, and Jordan Poole is that guy. I mean, like when Steph Curry's off the court this year, this guy's averaging like 25 a game. It's ridiculous how big of a scoring threat he is when Steph is on the court, and you have to implement him in this lineup because this guy can get buckets all day, all night. But they need to keep playing him, and they have to end games with him. Whether that means taking out Andrew Wiggins, or whether that means taking out like a Kevon Looney or an Andre Iguodala, you need to have Jordan Poole out there ending games. You just have to, and I think that's something that the Warriors understand. They're gonna have to play him a lot more minutes, but yeah, this is gonna be something that's something they have to do. They have to play Jordan Poole more minutes. In terms of the Nuggets, they got Nikola Jokic, and he's like a massive mismatch for anyone on the Golden State Warriors. We know at their best that the Warriors could be the best defense in the league, and I think that, and if we're talking about that version of the Warriors, it's going to be extremely difficult for Nikola Jokic. But I'm not worried about Jokic in this matchup. It's the other guys trying to hit shots.
Yeah.
It's really just the other guys trying to hit shots. Will Barton, it's weird, but he is the all-time leading 3-point shooter for the Denver Nuggets. He has the most threes in Nuggets history. He needs to play well. Aaron Gordon has to continue to play well, but where else are they going to get it from? I mean, like a Monte Morris, a Bones Highland. Again, there's just like so many like question marks with the remaining of the Nuggets. But one thing is for sure, Jokic is going to dominate, and they're going to have to ride that all the way throughout this entire series if they want to even have a chance. He has to be the best player on the court. And I even want to say he has to be the best player on the court by far for them to get the win here against the Golden State Warriors. Should be a very interesting series. The Warriors, we know they could be a very good defensive team, but even the best defensive teams are going to have problems stopping Nikola Jokic, and I think that's going to be a massive issue for them, like in this series throughout. But in terms of a prediction for the series, Jalon, who do you got? 3-6 Warriors Nuggets. Who do you got?
Man, I got Warriors in 6 games, and it just goes back to like you know what I mean, like what I said earlier about the Phoenix Suns thing, right? Their pathway. Like, let's go through like the 4 teams we've already discussed in these other 2 series, right? Minnesota, are you ready? Memphis, you say you're who you are, but have we seen it yet? Not yet. So until we've seen you prove it, until we see you prove it, because we've seen you prove it throughout the regular season. But when we see you once we see you prove it in the playoffs, there's where the belief is. But until then, there's still trepidations about you. Denver, Jokic is literally the only thing you feel confident about in terms of that team.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the questions is just who. It's not even it's not even what they're gonna do, just who is going to do in order to help Jokic along the way, right?
Yeah.
And then because they have guys like Aaron Gordon, like you mentioned beforehand, Will Barton, but like, are they going to do what you'd hope they are capable of doing when the chips are in the middle of the table like this, where we're talking about winning or going home? And then Golden State, which version? Because again, the volatility, even of what you mentioned beforehand, the volatility between all in Golden State could win this whole thing, and trash Golden State, or at least maybe the Golden State we've seen like as of late, or the back 9 of the season, is a team that could be out of here in this first round matchup alone. So I'm going to take them in 6 games because my belief is that they're closer to the peak version of themselves. I think they have a better chance at activating that version of themselves as opposed to what we've seen as of late, especially with Curry being out due to injury and things like that. This is blind faith in Golden State, but it also is just the fact that Denver has way more questions overall.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that is something I definitely looked at when trying to predict the series. Because the thing is, I mean, as much as Jokic could be the best player on the court for all 7 games, if you look at the next 4 or 5 guys, you can make the argument it's Golden State. You can go Curry, you can go Draymond, you can go Clay. You could even put Jordan Poole in the mix. Hey, hell, even if Andrew Wiggins plays at his best, you could put him as one of the top 6 players in the series. The Nuggets need someone in there, you know. And you said best. Who is it gonna be? I don't know. Can Aaron Gordon put himself into the top 5 players in the series? I don't know. Can it be Monte Morris? Could it be Will Barton? Like, just saying these names just doesn't feel right to me either. Saying that they're gonna be like top 5 players in this series, and that's something that's kind of tough there for the Denver Nuggets going up against the Golden State Warriors. But the thing is, Jokic is too good, man. Jokic is too good. He's such a good player. No matter what scenario you put him in, he's going to produce. That's why, even though I have the Golden State Warriors winning, I think it's going to go 7 games. I think it is. I think that early part of the series is going to be kind of tough for Golden State, just trying to reacclimate Steph Curry, trying to get everyone back on the same page, especially because it's been like a couple of years since him, Dre, and Clay fully got to be together. And I think Jokic is going to take full advantage in that situation. But at the end of the day, they're going to figure things out. They got that championship mentality they have already there. Give me Golden State to win in 7 games. With, honestly, Jordan Poole might end up being their best player, like at least in this series. Just as they try to figure stuff out, Jordan Poole might have to be that guy, which is crazy to say, but that could happen. That really could. The final series of the playoffs here, and it's I don't know if you want to say it's kind of underwhelming, especially because like of the kind of the storylines surrounding this series. But we got the number 4 Dallas Mavericks taking on the number 5 Utah Jazz. We don't know the status of Luka yet. It's him. I mean, what's funny about that final game of the regular season is that the NBA suspended him. Remember, they're going to suspend him for getting like too many technicals.
Yep.
But then they rescinded the tech. He played the game and then got injured. So I think Mavs fans are now like, no. We should have just got suspended. We should have just had Luka suspended. It would have been just so much better for that. And then the Jazz. Oh man, the Jazz. This is just wow. But I mean, Jalon, what are you looking for in the series? And like, what are some things you're looking out for?
TV. This is the cherry on top of the argument that the rest of the West is in shambles. This this series right here
Yeah.
is the cherry on top. Luka Doncic's status for playing, it's still right now pretty much up in the air. Utah, Quinn Snyder in the coaching talks for the Lakers coaching position. Granted, he said that he's not interested anymore, especially with the way they handled Frank Vogel. But Quinn Snyder was also in discussions as maybe being the next Duke head coach, with Coach K stepping away. Not to say that that's actually in play, because it seems like they're going to try to handle things internally, but it's
Yeah.
it's a storyline nonetheless. Donovan Mitchell's status on this team moving forward has been a question all year. He's been rumored to everywhere but Utah, basically, the entire season. Same thing with Rudy Gobert. There's been reports that Charlotte would be interested in all across the board. There's all these other teams that, if Dallas, for example, ironically
Yeah.
enough, too,
Yeah.
are teams that would be ecstatic if he were on the trade block and they were open for business, talking about the Utah Jazz. So there's so many things where you're just like, if you're Dallas, you're just like, bro, we're gonna have our best player or what? Like, are we gonna
Yeah.
like, because that's number one. Like, are we gonna have our best player or what? And then if you're Utah, you're just like, where's our head at? Like, are we like even interested in the postseason? Like, are we interested in postseason play right now? Or are we like already in Cancun, like
Yeah.
mentally? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there's that. But then you look at it even further, like Dallas, is Jalen Brunson gonna wet the bed again? Because
Yeah.
last season's postseason run was not good against the
Yeah.
Clippers. I think it was like 8 points, like just under three
Yeah.
assists per game or something like that.
He struggled. He struggled bad.
Struggled shooting the ball. Spencer Dinwiddie might have to be the lead guard for a game or two if Luka Doncic doesn't play, which definitely takes him out of his six-man role that he's thrived in, not
Yeah.
only just with Dallas, but just in general in his career
Yeah.
with like
Yeah.
Brooklyn as well.
Yeah.
So like, are you asking Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith to win you a game? Like, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm just saying you're asking a lot.
Yeah.
And then for Utah, you've been here. We've seen this movie before. It's actually had multiple sequels.
Multiple.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's had
Yeah.
multiple sequels.
Yeah.
And here we are again
Yeah.
for part 4, part 5.
Yeah.
And you have to ask yourself, when do they break through? Because TV, I'll kind of frame this as a question for you, kind of like in order to kind of
Yeah.
pass to you to get your thoughts. But like, this has to be Utah's last chance before they blow this thing up, right? Like,
Yeah.
realistically.
Yeah. No, 100%. If this goes, like, if this ends up being another first round exit, expect the head coach gone. Expect one of Donovan Mitchell or Rudy Gobert gone. Rudy Gobert most likely, because Donovan Mitchell is just a lot more valuable to that team. But going into my thoughts in this
Right.
series, I mean, before the Luka Doncic injury, I was like, look, the Mavs want to take the Jazz. With the Jazz that they are right now, the Mavs want this version of the Jazz, and I think they can handle them like pretty easily. This Doncic injury throws a spanner into the works. Like, I don't know, like where do you even go with this series now? I mean, how many games is Luka gonna miss? We've seen him like in the playoffs in the past, kind of like force it, even though he's injured, like the LA series last year. Ever since that like minor injury he had, he kind of struggled in games 5, 6, and 7. That just absolutely hurts the Mavericks. And it's not like they have like someone like crazy as like a secondary star. Like you mentioned, Spencer Dinwiddie is gonna have to be their number one guy if Doncic doesn't play. And that's a fact. And and I don't care what version of the Jazz you're facing. I don't like those chances for the Dallas
No.
Mavericks, no matter what version of the Jazz. But the Jazz, man, you talked about them having to break through. Out of all the seasons they've been together, this is the last year I'm thinking that they're going to be able to break through. They are putting so much pressure on Rudy Gobert on the rim. They just don't have enough perimeter defending besides Royce O'Neal. They cannot hold on to leads. They've given up like 4 or 5 20-point like leads within the last 2 months. And their fourth quarter scoring, like, what are they going to do now? I mean, like, what's going to be different? Like Mitchell has said throughout the season, like, nothing has changed. It's a lot on you, Donovan, by the way. I mean, this is the first year where I see like a lot more Donovan Mitchell slander than usual.
Yeah.
But what's going to change there? They might just end up just falling themselves into the second round just because of the whole Luka Doncic factor. I don't know, but if Luka Doncic is on the court and is playing at his like 95%, near 100% level, you kind of have to go with the Mavs, but at the same time, there's just too many questions in this series. And like, I mean, you put it best with the rest of this West. Besides the Suns, there's just way too many question marks with the rest of these teams. So it does feel like it's theirs to lose, but the Mavs with like a lot, like I had a lot of confidence in them going into this playoffs. Another Luka injury to kind of send him back, kind of tough. And then the Jazz questions throughout the entire season. I don't know what's gonna happen here. They're probably gonna they're gonna have a 25-point lead in the game one and just lose it to Jalen Brunson scoring 20 points in the quarter. That's the type of stuff we're gonna see from this series. I don't think they like each other that much. I really don't think so. And you have to put it right as well. I mean, are they mentally already in the offseason? What are we going to see, like playoff ready Utah Jazz or not? And I think that's going to be a big question this series. The biggest question for the Mavs is Luka, please, like, is Luka, please come back. Just please. Honestly, that's the only, like, I don't really like watching Jazz games in general, but Luka needs to play for me to really be invested in this series. Yeah. We need to see Luka and near like 100% Luka. Hopefully he'll be available. If not game one, hopefully game two. But we're gonna have to wait and see. Final predictions of the pod. Jalon, Mavs versus Jazz. Who do you got in this final matchup? I mean, it's a tough one.
I got the Mavs in 7 games. I'd love to pick Utah, and Utah, everything on paper says that they should be ready, but everything on paper says that they should have been ready again the last 2-3 seasons, even in terms of where they've been. And this season is kind of like the peak level of like background noise, lack of production on the floor. Like again, even from a regular season standpoint, this is kind of like one of their worst seasons as of late. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And with Dallas, you have to believe that even if Luka doesn't play in game one, you have to believe that he's gonna play in this series. The boy grew up in the Euro League. There's no way in the world that if he is able to play, he's going to not play. Yeah. Now, of course, there's the idea of like the Terrell Owens syndrome where people will say like, yeah, he's injured. That's your best. Yeah, he's your best player, but he's injured. That can sometimes lead as a net negative. Not for this Dallas Mavericks team. No, if you even want a chance, you're better with Luka Doncic. Just the gravity he requires, like on the floor. Even if he's not averaging 30 points a game throughout this series, the mere gravity that he creates, kind of like from a Steph Curry standpoint, of like he is the focal point of this offense, alone frees up so much for this Mavs team that without him, this team becomes easily, an under the radar team that we're looking at as maybe just good enough to make the play in, but not really a real threat. So the gravity of him alone takes them a long way from being a play-in caliber team to at least a team that can be competitive in a first round series. But Luka Doncic healthy wins them a series. I think that Luka plays enough in this series for them to win. But I think, especially because we don't know his status for game one, that this is going to have to be kind of a knockdown, drag out kind of like series. And so out of all the series that I picked, I think this is one where realistically, I think regardless of the winner, it goes to 7 games.
Interesting. And yeah, in terms of my prediction here, Dallas has gone out the last 2 years in the first round. And with Luka Doncic, and you sign him to the massive contract extension, he's going to play. Like you said, he's going to play, like, whether it's game one, game two, he's going to play. But the idea, there's nothing from this Utah team that gives me any sort of confidence that they're going to be able to like put themselves, like, play at their best at the series. Nothing has shown me that this year. And with that being said, give me the Mavs to win. You say it's going to go 7 games. I think it's going to go 6. Okay. I think it's going to go 6. Mostly because just Utah's like behavior, like the way that they're doing it, I really do feel like they just want to get the season over with. They don't want to be with each other. They just feel like they don't want to be with each other. And I think, like, I know this is like a really random trade to bring up, but them trading away Joe Ingles, even though he was injured for like the rest of the season, that affected their locker room, man. I think that Joe Ingles is that type of guy kind of like to lighten up the mood in the locker room and stuff like that. Taking him away from the situation, I think, has kind of made things worse, even though you did get a young piece in Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Mm-hmm. It's this that type of little stuff. The locker room's in shambles. I don't think like there's gonna be like a major overhaul in this team next year about like we're gonna see a completely different like Jazz team. And the Mavs, Doncic, him being there or not is going to be the determining factor, but I think he's going to play enough. And the guys around him are just good enough to get past the series, just because the Jazz are not even close to like what we know they could be. Give me the Mavs in 6. I just have no faith in the Jazz whatsoever. None. Like literally nothing right now. And I gotta go with the Mavs here. But yeah, those are all our playoff predictions. Let us know down below what you guys think. East and West, there's gonna be some crazy series. The playoffs start tomorrow as of this. So I know I'm excited. Jalon, you gotta be excited, right?
Yeah, man, this is about to be one of the best playoff runs in a while.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm glad that a lot of more attention's on the East, man. The East is gonna be ridiculous. Especially for us who don't have to stay up super late. Like, say if like the Mavs are winning by 30 in like game 3, we don't have to like watch the remainder of that game. But with the East, there's gonna be a lot of good games. West, hopefully these teams will show up, but it should be really fun. Before we head out, Jalon, I'm gonna throw it over to you. What's going on on your side, the Hoop Talk Pod? What's stuff that we gotta look out for going forward?
Yeah, man, I am officially in full tilt right now with the Hoop Talk podcast, obviously being like my primary focus at the moment. I'm also going through a mini behind the scenes thing in terms of rebranding the Basketball Genius one page TV. You're familiar with that stuff just because we have done the Hoop Talk versus TV on basketball, daily picks challenge stuff, and you tagged it in. But next year, I want to be able to not only involve that in our daily picks challenge things, but I also have a lot of stuff over the course of this playoffs, this upcoming off season, and everything. So I've just kind of been laying the framework for the Basketball Genius page. It's probably going to get rebranded into something else. Probably be a different name within the next month. So that would be interesting too. Outside of that, man, look, I am all Bulls then, man. Look, for the next 2 weeks minimum, I am all Bulls everything. Don't get me wrong, definitely watching those other series, but I am all about the Bulls because look, I'm trying to send as many positive vibes to the Chicago area as humanly possible because I think we are going to need every bit of it in order to make this kind of run because the Bulls, this is the season to remember. Don't get it wrong. This has definitely been a regular season to remember, but we just cannot go out down bad in 4 games. We just can't let it happen. And I think we're good enough to make this series go the distance, but it's going to take a lot. So right now I am fully invested into the Bulls. Going to have a lot of Bulls content come up. And maybe even some Bulls playoff reaction videos, TV, man. I'm not going to lie, man. We might end up doing some live streams following some of these games and stuff as well. So, yeah, just looking forward to the playoffs, dude. This is the best time of the year in terms of basketball outside of March Madness.
Yes, just look out for a lot of content from both myself and Jalon. All of the Hoop Talk podcast stuff is going to be in the description below. All the Basketball Genius stuff as well. Go check it out. It's going to be awesome. And of course, we're going to have him on the pod probably sometime during the playoffs for some sort of reaction. Even on live streams, definitely look at that on the Instagram page. Should be really fun. But yeah, thanks again, Jalon, for coming on, man.
Definitely, man. Appreciate you for letting me come on.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is where guys going to end it. Thank you guys for watching or listening. Remember to show love on all the podcast channels. Like, share, and subscribe if you're on YouTube as well. Hit the notification bell. And remember to follow at TV on basketball on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok for awesome content and updates on the pod. I want to say that I'm going to be back here should be Monday to kind of give my first reactions on game ones of all the game ones in the playoffs so far. And look out for more content. I'm going to be at game 3 of Raptors versus 76ers. So be lookout for that. There's an idea. I might be asking some fans some questions outside the arena. You'll have to wait and see. But let's hopefully be able to see that. But yeah, it's gonna be super dope. Except for the NBA playoffs, and just look out for a bunch more playoff content going forward. Thank you guys for all the support. Hope you have a fantastic day, Jalon. It was awesome having you on the pod once again. Thank you for getting your time here. And yeah, it should be awesome playoffs. Hope you guys have a great rest of the weekend. Take it easy, guys. That's me. Here's Jalon. See you guys. Peace.